Is it just me, or are the wheels really coming off the bus lately in our culture? I will edit this, but Representative Mike Collins of Georgia tweeted yesterday something like this: heck of a week for the left. Gay porn in the Senate, swearing-in ceremony on child porn in Virginia, transgendered tap dancers in the White House, and satanic statues in Iowa. What else am I missing? Man, it's just, we look at this stuff, and if you've been following the news, those are real things, just crazy stuff happening in our world. And sometimes it's easy for us to feel this temptation to go, things are worse than they've ever been. We've got it worse than anybody has ever had it. This is so bad. Well, let's acknowledge things are bad. Things are bad. Things are not what we would choose. They're not the way we like them or we would want them. But it is completely wrong to think that things are worse than they've ever been. In fact, if people are truly, totally depraved, utterly lost and hopeless in sin, you can't get worse than that. That's always been true. And if any place in the Bible proves how bad humanity is, it's the book of Judges. Now, the time of the Judges is that unique period in Israel's history when they have entered the promised land, but nothing has lived up to the promise. They disobeyed God and did not drive out the enemies before them, and so now they're living in the land of promise, but with enemies. They're sharing it with enemies, Midianites and Philistines and Hivites and Perizzites and Jebusites, and they're all around, and they are constantly under attack. But worse yet, worse than even having enemies is when the children of God begin to live like them. All those commands in the book of Leviticus, when you read them and you go, really? Does there have to be a law against that? The book of Judges proves, yeah, there needed to be a law against that, because without it, people are doing it. And the truth is, even with it, people are doing it. The list of terrible sins in the book of Judges is a long list. Rape, murder, bestiality, just horrible stuff happens. And the very theme of the book of Judges is, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes, because there was no king in Israel. Now, it doesn't say that they were all doing what was wrong. They were all doing what they knew they could get away with. They knew that they were doing wrong, and they got away with wrong because there was no king. It says they were all doing what they believed to be right. If you want to know what the philosophy of following your own conscience is all about, just read the book of Judges, because that's where that leads. Without an external source that teaches us God's standard, we're left to our own, and that's what it looks like. It looks like the book of Judges. And Judges is a hopeless book in so many ways. But underneath all the terrible sin and crime of Judges, there's a note of hope, because just when we hear this line repeated throughout Judges, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes, there was no king in Israel. Well, that right there it is. Did you hear that? Did you hear that note of hope? What they need is a king. What they need is someone who's going to show them what right and wrong really is. Someone who can not only lead them out of the mess they're in, someone who can ultimately give them righteousness. So there's this sense of expectation. And in the middle of this chaotic period of the Judges, there's another story. With all of the horrible stuff going on, we come to the book of Ruth. And Ruth is contemporaneous with Judges. And it's like Judges has given us the wide angle. Here's what's going on in the culture. Here's all the horrible stuff that's happening. This person and this judge was raised up to deliver them from this wicked group, and then this sin occurred, and that's the book of Judges. But now the book of Ruth is like the director zooms in on the story of one family. It doesn't begin well. They leave Bethlehem, and a lot of word plays going on in Judges. Bethlehem means the house of bread. But we're told there's a famine in the house of bread. And so they leave the house of bread, and they leave the land of promise to go where? To Moab. Now, Moab is a cursed land. Moab is across the Dead Sea. Moab is where the enemies of God live, and they don't trust God in their own land. They don't trust God to provide for them in the house of bread. They go to Moab, the land that is against God, the land of people who have arrayed themselves against the Lord's anointed, and they think they're going to find sustenance there. And this man, Elimelech, he takes his two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and his wife, Naomi, and they go to Moab, and they sojourn as a Moabite. They live like the Moabites. They take two Moabite wives. And then the worst happens. Elimelech dies, Mahlon and Chilion, they die. Naomi, this Jewish woman from Bethlehem, is left now in a foreign land with no men to care for her. And in the ancient Near East, that's a terrible fate. There's no way for a woman to provide for herself, especially if she's an outsider, she's a foreigner. And she tells her daughters-in-law to go home. I got no more sons for you. You need to just go back to your people, and I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. And the one daughter-in-law says, well, I've loved you. You've been a great mother-in-law. I'm going to take your advice. I'm going back to my people. But the one named Ruth, something's happened in her. She says to her, no, don't ask me to leave you or to depart from being with you. Where you go, I'm going. And your God will be my God, and your people will be my people. And where you die, that's where I'll die, and I'll be buried. I mean, this is Ruth, this Moabite, completely forsaking her own culture and people. Notice the key line in it is, your God will be my God. Something has happened in the heart of this woman. She knows that the God of the Hebrews is the true God, and she's willing to stake everything on it. So they go back to Bethlehem, and there in Bethlehem, you know the story of Ruth. It's an incredible story. It's the romance of redemption. Naomi tells her daughter-in-law Ruth where to glean. Now remember, they're disenfranchised, poor women, and they have no way of supporting themselves, so they have to resort to what poor people do, which is you go gleaning in the fields. God commanded the landowners to never cut the corners of the field when they're harvesting their grain, their barley, their wheat. They're to leave the corners uncut so that any poor people can come along and they can cut that, and it gives them the dignity of work. They have to work for it. It's not just a handout. They work for it, but it's there for them. It's theirs for the taking. And also, if any of the workers drop some, they're not allowed to pick it up. They have to leave it for the poor, the stranger in the land, the widow. And so this was God's system of caring for those three categories: the poor, the stranger in the land, the foreigner, and the widow. And so Naomi tells Ruth, now look, you go to this particular field and you glean among the workers of this guy Boaz. He is a kinsman of ours. That's an important detail. He's a kinsman of ours, and I think he'll treat you right. And you know the story. Ruth goes there, Boaz sees her. He shows her special favor. He tells his workers to drop some on purpose around her to make sure that she's cared for. He tells Ruth, now don't go to anybody else's field. You stay right here with mine. You work with my servants. And even when the night comes where they actually roast some of the grain, he roasts her grain, and then he gives her enough to take for her mother-in-law. And Naomi is watching this, and Naomi's putting it all together and saying, hey, I think he's fallen for you. And Ruth, ever demurs, like, well, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And Naomi says, now look, he's near of kin to us. And you see, we've got this custom called the levirate marriage. And that is that when a son dies without any heirs, his nearest of kin is supposed to marry the widow. He has to pay off any debts. He has to buy any land that the deceased owned. And he has to marry the widow. He has to have a child with her that is not counted his child. It's counted the child of the deceased, so that his name is not forgotten. And he's still entered into the genealogy. Genealogy is a very important thing in Israel. You have to be able to tell where you're from and who you belong to and what tribe you're in. All of that matters greatly for land rights and for making a living from the land. And so she says, he's near of kin to you. Hang out with him. Let's see if he gets interested. And you know that there's the incredible scene there where one night there in the threshing floor, Ruth sort of reveals to him that she's interested, and Boaz says to her, now look, there's somebody that's nearer kin to you than I am, and we've got to see if he will redeem you first. And so chapter 4 is now the climax of the story. Either Boaz is going to redeem her or this other guy will. What's going to happen? And so verse 1, now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. Now, the gate of the city is where all business was transacted. It's where the elders sat. If you needed to make a deal, strike a deal, you did it there at the gate of the city where the elders were witnesses. So all the important stuff happens at the gate of the city. And Boaz goes there, waits for this guy who's the nearest of kin to Ruth's deceased husband, and he says, hey, come here a minute. I want to talk to you about something. And so in front of witnesses, this already has the sense of formality to it. Turn in here. I want to talk to you. And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and he said, sit down here. Now, this is getting more official all the time, isn't it? I mean, you can imagine the guy thinks, I'm about to be sued. Why is he getting all these witnesses together? So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I'd tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there's no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Okay, this must have put a little bit of a clutch in Boaz's spirit. But now notice how wisely Boaz has done it. He hasn't given all the information yet, has he? So far, it's only about a field. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I can increase my wealth. I own somebody else's field. Yeah, I'll buy that field. Well, there's a little more detail. Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite. Notice that detail. Well, she's not even a good Jewish girl. She's from Moab, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. In other words, okay, if you want the field, you got to take a woman, and not just any woman. She's a Moabite woman. And remember, when you have a child with her, it will not be considered yours. You up for that? Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Well, man, that'll mess me up. I mean, I'm in a line of inheritance, and if suddenly I've joined in that line of inheritance, I don't even exist anymore. I'm the proxy for this dead guy. Who's going to inherit my stuff? It just clouds things too much. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now notice, he's still saying it. He's talking about a field, lest he sound like he doesn't want Ruth. But we all know what he really is saying is take her. I don't want her. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So you had this formality. If you got a divorce, anytime you were breaking a covenant or denying a responsibility, you went through this process. You took off your sandal, you held it up in front of the elders, you gave it away, you said, I'm not fulfilling my duty here. This is the sign, the formal sign that I am denying my responsibility. And so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you're witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon, also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we're witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. Now, who's that? Well, those are the matriarchs of Israel, the two wives of Jacob, the ones who they and their handmaids bore the 12 tribes of Israel, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception. Now, this is not my sermon, but I cannot help myself but pause at those words. Who gives conception? Who is it? The Lord gives conception. And who is any human being to take away that which the Lord has given? The Lord gave conception. It's his act. Yeah, human beings are involved, but human life is of the Lord, and we do not have the right to take it away. The Lord gave conception. You make your own sermon now. You take that and do with it. That's not where I'm staying, but boy, what a point. The Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who's more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took this grandchild and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Bethlehem proves that God is in control. I mean, everything about this little backwater town is messed up. It's the period of the judges. There's no king. I mean, the fact that throughout the story, underlying Boaz's care of Ruth is the danger she's in, right? She has to stay close to his maidens. And he has to tell his workers, don't you lay a hand on her. Don't mess with her. There's this constant danger, and yet she's protected from that danger. And through this all, in fact, I think the writer of Ruth is toying with us on some level. The whole thing is about how much God is in control. Here's this beautiful love story in the middle of the awful period of the judges. And yet, in Ruth chapter 2, in verse 3, it says, so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. You think the writer really thinks that just happened? Or do you think the writer is like sort of making a joke there? Oh yeah, it just happened like that. Oh, it was a total accident. She could have gone to any field. I'll tell you this though, if Ruth had not gone to that field in Bethlehem that day, we wouldn't be celebrating Christmas now. I mean, you think about it. If Ruth doesn't meet Boaz, there's no Christmas. We read the genealogy from Matthew 1. Cut it off after Salmon. The Boaz, I mean, he marries somebody else. What happens? There's no Jesus. There is no star of Bethlehem. There are no magi coming because they've seen his star in the east. If God's not in control of every detail, every facet of the story, how does it turn out the same? Either he's completely in control or he's not in control at all, but you really can't have anything in between. And this is, the book of Ruth is the thing I think that proves more than anything else, God is in absolute control, because if you were just looking at the circumstances, you'd miss it. It's so dark, it's such a dark time, and yet God's light shines brightest when times are darkest. It's so easy for us to look around and our hearts be filled with anxiety and we're just torn apart. Look how bad things are. But don't let anxiety rob you of faith, because God is in control. He's working his purpose. His plan is not going to be thwarted even by the sinfulness of humanity. And God's power shows mightiest when we're weakest. Can you think of anyone with less power in all the Old Testament than Ruth? What rights does she have in Israel? Absolutely none. She's a Moabite. She's not an Israelite. And she's a woman. And she's a widowed woman. On every count, she is weakened and disenfranchised and incapable of making a way for herself. She's weak. Don't let chaos rob you of peace, because God is at work. God's at work in this most unlikely of characters, ultimately not just to find a way for Mahlon to have a kinsman redeemer perpetuate his name, but for God to bring about a Messiah. He's at work. You know, we've longed for this to happen. We've longed for ages, from the time of Genesis 3, when God promised that there would come a seed of the woman to crush the head of the serpent. We've longed for this. And then when he tells Abraham that he's going to provide a sacrifice himself, We've longed for it. And then when Moses implements the Passover, we know that there's going to come a lamb. When he says, I'm going to raise up a prophet like unto Moses, we've longed for this. And here there's this sense of longing. We're longing for a king. But God's provision is most timely when it seems late. Just because we're longing for it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Don't let longing rob you of rest. God's delays are not his denials. He's not necessarily saying no, he's saying not yet. You just trust him. He's working all things according to his purposes. It's easy for us to look around in our day and say, wow, man, the world has just gone crazy. It looks like we're losing all the main cultural battles. We're being relegated to the dustbin of history. We're no longer relevant whatsoever. Nobody's listening to us. The world doesn't like Christianity. Oh, they're okay with some generic sense of spirituality. You don't have to define what you believe. And anything you believe is okay so long as you're not saying Jesus is Lord. And we feel that. But don't let longing for God to reveal himself rob you of rest, because God is always on time. It happens exactly when he wants it to. And nothing illustrates that for us more than this incredible story, this romance of redemption in the book of Ruth. In fact, we're so accustomed to hearing the word redeem, and we talk about redemption, and we sing about I'm redeemed, and he's our redeemer, that we really lose sight of where this word comes from. But this is it. In the Old Testament, when you have this very circumstance that someone dies, a man dies, leaving his wife a widow and childless, she has to be redeemed. And in this story, we've got two potential redeemers. Now, there's no question which one is the ultimate redeemer. The author of the anonymous author of this book wants us to know that Boaz is Bethlehem's redeemer. Now, what do you have to do? What are the qualifications to be someone's redeemer? Three primary things. First of all, you've got to be near of kin. When God divided up the land among the 12 tribes, he had to ensure that, like, the tribe of Manasseh couldn't get really wealthy and go buy all the land from the tribe of Benjamin. Because you could have a scenario in which some tribes got wealthy, others got poor, some took advantage of their brothers and got their property. So God gave each tribe a certain piece of property in Israel, divided the land up into these 12 tribes, and he said, you can never sell your land outside of your tribe. And even when you sell it, it's really like a lease, because at the year of Jubilee, every 50th year, the land reverts back to the original owning family. But you can still only lease it out within your tribe. And this preserved, in an agrarian society, land is life. You've got to produce food, and you've got to tend to sheep that graze and cattle. You got to have land to do that. So God protects the land by saying you can't sell it outside of your tribe. You've got to preserve it. So this kinsman redeemer can't be from another tribe or another family, or else then the original family and tribe are losing property, and you could be taken advantage of. So he's got to be near of kin, got to be from the same clan. Secondly, he's got to be able to pay the price. I mean, if it were free, who wouldn't want it, right? Oh yeah, I mean, I'll take that land and take this woman with it, you know? And if that's all involved, a woman could very easily be abused because someone getting something for nothing. Oh, if I got to take her too, I'll take her too. But as long as it doesn't cost me anything, I'm still coming out ahead. And you could have that attitude, but not so with this custom. He had to have enough money that he himself could pay the price to actually buy the field. So this would care for, in this case, Naomi, a widow. She would receive money for her dead husband's field so she could have enough to live on. And he, in turn, is able to pay the price, and he's near of kin. And then there's a third thing. He's really got to be willing to lose himself. And this is the kicker. Because maybe you want more property. Maybe you're even willing to get a wife in the deal. But then to be told, now if you father a child, nobody's going to call it yours. Well, that's awkward. I don't think I want that. So a redeemer has to be willing to completely lose himself. It's not about me. It's about me doing a service to my dead relative so that his name is perpetuated, and the firstborn will be considered his and will therefore inherit the thing I have now paid for. I don't get to determine the heir. I've provided for my dead relative. And Boaz is the one who says he's willing to do that. Now, Bethlehem's redeemed. The one who needs redemption here, of course, is Ruth. And when he redeems her, did you notice, when they go through this process, and they perform what's called the get. And the other guy says, no, I'd take the field, but I don't want her. And I don't want to mess up my inheritance. I don't want to mess up my plans. So no, I'm not willing to do this. He immediately takes off his sandal. Hey, here, buddy, it's yours. Boaz gladly takes it. Now, Ruth, here's what they say to her. Listen to the blessing pronounced on her. Verse 11, then all the people who were at the gate and elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. I love that phrase, coming into your house. Lovely euphemistic phrase, isn't it? But we all know what it means. This isn't for a visit. She's going to be his wife. And everything in the first 3 chapters leading up to this has told us that Boaz and Ruth have already found each other attractive. They're ready for this. They just need to do the right thing. But she is going to come into his house. She's going to love him responsively. She had no right to initiate the contact. You can't go up to someone and say, you must be my redeemer. You have no right to do that, no way to do that, no pull with which to do that. On what basis could you ever demand someone to be your redeemer? And she does not. But she shows herself. She shows her character. She shows her availability. And Boaz, seeing that, says, I want to redeem her. She's told to love responsibly. Secondly, to live fruitfully. May you be like Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah are the mothers of our nation. They were the mothers of the 12 tribes. May you be blessed as they were, that God would use you to impact a nation. And may you act worthily. Okay, this is a loaded word. It's used in the very first chapter our second chapter in verse 1 of Boaz. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech. So we're told that Boaz is a worthy man. You know where else we see that word used? You remember, how many Mother's Day sermons have you heard from Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10? Who can find it's usually translated virtuous woman. You know what it is? a worthy woman, for her price is far above rubies. This is telling us that Ruth is like the Proverbs 31 woman. She is a worthy woman. She's godly, she's gracious, she's loving. She reflects everything God wants her to reflect in her heart and now in her home as she joins her life with Boaz's. And this is the pronouncement. This is the blessing that the witnesses pronounce on her. Love responsively, live fruitfully, act worthily. And you know, God blesses and gives conception. And here's Bethlehem's baby. Probably not the baby you thought you'd hear about in Bethlehem today, but his name is Obed. But how does the book end? Obed is the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. And one of the things I've always tried to teach you as your pastor is the beautiful connectedness of all the scriptures. It's not 66 different stories. It's how many stories? It's one story. Now let's see. Bethlehem, a chaotic moment in history. Everybody looking for a king, a young woman, a baby's birth. You think we can find any New Testament connections here? See, here's the beauty of this. It reminds us that like Ruth, we needed rescue. We're in a dangerous time and place. We have no way to provide for ourselves spiritually or to secure our future. We are lost and incapable of finding security in ourselves. We needed a redeemer. So we go to the gates of the city. Oh, here's a potential redeemer. The law. Mr. Law, can you save us? The law says, I can't save you. I can only condemn you. I can tell you how bad you are, but I can't save you. Well, how about, here's a potential redeemer. How about good intentions? Surely good intentions can turn us around and change things, but good intentions fail us. Good intentions confuse us. Good intentions change with the moment, and good intentions just don't tend to get carried out. Good intentions can't redeem us. Oh, how about religion? Surely religion is the redeemer we all need. But we all know religion doesn't even make us good. How many wars in the world right now are being waged primarily because of religion? Religion can't redeem us. Religion doesn't offer us anything. It offers no salvation. So our hearts are bereft. Who can redeem us? We feel like that scene in Revelation chapter 5. When John is taken into heaven and he's shown this entire scroll of history with its seals. And he says, I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look into it. I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. One of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, The root of David has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. See, there was only one who met all the criteria and came forward to redeem us. Hallelujah. Jesus was willing and able to redeem us. I do not know by any explanation of the incarnation what happened that night in Bethlehem. I cannot comprehend how a young girl who had never been with a man became the mother of God. I cannot conceive how she conceived a physical baby of the Holy Spirit. I do not understand how the eternal entered time and the infinite was constrained in a human body. I cannot adequately articulate how the Ancient of Days was swaddled and suckled. I only know that on that night, the highest authority took the lowliest place, and the only begotten of the Father became the firstborn of a virgin. The one seated on heaven's throne became the baby laid in a manger. And he before whom the angels had cried, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," now cried at the breast of his young mother to the bleating of the sheep and the lowing of cattle and the braying of donkeys. And he did it for one reason alone. He had a people to redeem. Don't lose the theological in the sentimental. Jesus was near of kin, born from a line of sinners. Well, there was a prostitute in his line. He's kin to me. There were adulterers in his line. He's kin to me. There was a cursed Moabite Gentile. He's kin to me. There was an abused seductress like Tamar. He's kin to me. And because he's near of kin, he can redeem sinners. He alone was able to pay the price, because the price was a perfect life that could be sacrificed to redeem imperfect lives. And he was willing to lose himself, laying aside the robes of glory to become an infant. George MacDonald writes, "They were all looking for a king to slay their foes and lift them high. Thou camest a little baby thing that made a woman cry." Oh, when Jesus came to redeem his people, the angels so marveled that they broke out in chorus, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Why? Because the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and the seals. And you know, there's one more song that remains to be sung. It's the song of rejoicing when one sinner comes home. This is what Jesus said. You want to know what makes heaven rejoice? You want to know what gladdens the heart of the Father? It's when one sinner repents. Oh, we've heard the song of the angels on that first Christmas. But how we long for another song to break out in heaven today. How we want to see heaven rejoice because someone here found a Redeemer. You can come home for Christmas. That's what being saved is like. It's coming home. It's finding that the Redeemer who was willing and able to redeem you, wants to receive you to himself so you can love responsively, live fruitfully. If you've never put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, now is the moment. Why would you not? If you just right where you are, with just in the silent cry of your heart, say, Lord, I need a Redeemer. I'm helpless and hopeless and broken, but I believe that you came to redeem me, and I am putting my faith and trust in you. If you'll do that, if just silently you cry out to him, he who hears your silent cry will never say no to that prayer. He'll redeem you.